You still trying to transfer it?
Yeah, that's a copy of it. I'm not here. Okay. And here, you go. Check it.
In case you see me run out and die. I understand, I know because you're not gonna need it, and right.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Thank you.
On down.
Yeah. What's the name of it?
It should be Thursday.
Thursday. That's a dumb question, wasn't it? I didn't ask that. Don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it. I said you copied it twice. Go ahead.
List was already on there. You didn't see
it. We didn't see it. He put that on me. And both of us like, yes, man, we got it. He copied it 8 times. Oh, you see it now, brother? Just messy this morning. But I tell you, some people. Okay, Dr. Johnson Benifield, we have an online version of Microsoft Office, so hopefully it won't be an issue with the clicker. So try and test it with the clicker and see if it advances. If it doesn't, then I have to do it manually. We good? Okay. All right, so go back to the initial. Okay, so I'm going to do the brief intro. Okay. I'm not reading the whole bio.
Oh,
I'm going to read the first paragraph, the last paragraph. Feel free to fill in the gaps. Any further than that. I mean, I will follow you, but I prefer not to.
Yeah.
Walk on your laptop.
You don't want to be.
You don't stand still, y'all. Gotta move. All right, so let me. You have any questions for me about anything?
You said you told me the outlines and the guidelines, so
Yes,
I think
you got them. You got them.
I think I can adhere.
Yeah, I have faith in you. And brother Swat, I love you, so I mean, you should have no problems.
Oh, is that?
You get an endorsement from that, brother. You good to go.
My sister is in the shrine over in Atlanta.
Oh, really? What's her name?
Olivia Mandela.
Oh, wow, that's a strong sister. Yeah, she's been strong for a minute too.
She's been in there for.
Yeah, she's been a minute. She's been
since the 1980s.
For a long time. Yeah, I joined in 1992, and I know her name, and I was active in Houston. So yes, ma'am. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. You got any questions for me? You good? Okay.
Good.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for being here. As always, for those that don't know, Thursday morning breakfast is an event we do every Thursday morning because there's a lot of good going on in the city, and the people that need that good to be done in their lives, they don't always know about that good. So what we do with Thursday morning breakfast, the parent organization, my group is the Grow for Care Alliance. GROW is an acronym, CARE is an acronym, generating real opportunities to win. The number 4, community action results empowerment. So when you put them together, you have generating real opportunities to win for community action results and empowerment, which you cannot do if you don't have information, which you cannot do if you don't have the right connections. You cannot do if you don't have the right alliances. So we try to bring in every Thursday morning subject matter experts in the public and private sector to let the community know what's what so the community can benefit and move forward. And of course, when it comes to elections, this is something that we most certainly, as a community, as a melanated group in this country, all grassroots groups in this country, poor people, we need to be plugged into politics. We lose when we're not plugged in because we don't understand what's going on. And with this particular election, there are 17 propositions which we absolutely must know about because that's how things get done. And unfortunately for us, for other grassroots groups, we don't always get what we need done because we're not plugged into the process. Most of us don't even understand the process. So we want to make sure that, again, not only are we connected to the subject matter experts, but we are doing what they outlined for us to do so that we can get our agenda taken care of and we can get things that we need done as well. But of course, you cannot win the game if you're not playing the game. And I'm not even sure if we're in the same ballpark to play the game. We at the park somewhere, dropping it like it's hot, and that's part of the problem. So I'm going to read portions of Dr. Annie Johnson Benefield's bio, because Lord have mercy, she sent me 8,000 paragraphs. And then she's going to fill in the gaps. So Dr. Annie Johnson Benefield, president and co-founder of Houston Voting Initiative, a nonprofit civic organization whose mission is to educate, empower, and mobilize voters in marginalized communities of color to actively engage in the political process through voting and advocacy in the greater Houston metropolitan area. In 2024, Dr. Benefield was named President Emeritus from Lone Star College after 23 years of facilitating learning and service in the academic arena. Along with that distinguished honor came an endowed name scholarship, which the first student received in fall 2025 and will occur annually into perpetuity. Jumping down to the last paragraph. Though officially retired from academia, officially retired, quote unquote, Dr. Benefield remains actively engaged in the community. Annie's involvement includes service on the Houston Endowment's Voter Engagement Project Advisory Board, on voter outreach efforts, a member of the Houston in Action Steering Committee, a member of the Alabama A&M University Houston Alumni Association, where she served as scholarship chair for the past 15 years, vice president of the University of Houston Friends of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, it's a long name, board. And she's a proud member of Houston Metropolitan Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, an international service organization. Annie is also a member of Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church, where she serves on the usher and the legal and social justice ministry. Amen and ashe to that. And if you guys can give a good round of applause for Dr. Annie Johnson Benefield, he will let us know what we need to know about these 17 propositions.
Good morning, everyone. It's exciting an opportunity to be here to educate, because that is what the Houston Voting Initiative primary goal is, to educate, empower, and mobilize people. And so I feel that if we operate from the premise of people being educated, then they feel empowered, and subsequently they can be mobilized into action for advocacy on their own behalf and for the behalf of their community, as well as participate in the political process through voting. Voting is just one means by which to have your voice heard. And right now we're in the midst of election season. Early voting started on Monday. I've been looking at the numbers, and I have to say I'm not as happy with the results on a day-to-day basis and turnout, particularly in communities of color. So we need to engage. We need to activate and engage individuals in those communities to turn out and vote, because that is the only way. Democracy is not a spectator sport where you get the luxury of coming into the arena and watching from the bleachers as things unfold on the floor, but rather it's a gladiator sport. You have to get in the arena and fight for the things that you believe in. So if you believe in equality, if you believe in equity, you believe in justice, you believe in voting rights, then you have to fight to ensure that those rights are maintained. So there's 17 proposed constitutional amendments. Just to give you a brief idea of the amendments and how the process works, it requires a 2/3 majority in the state house and the state senate. That means in the Texas legislature, there are 150 members of the house and there are 31 members of the state senate. So you need 100 of them in the state house and 21 of them in the state senate to pass the constitutional amendment. And then the governor is not allegedly involved in the process. There's nothing through that process that the governor is involved in. Then you send it to, then it's sent to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State craft the language the way it's going to appear on the ballot. Then the voters in the state, 50+1, get to decide. So in Texas, there are 18.6 million registered voters. In Harris County alone, there are 2.6 million registered voters. So it only requires one more of, if 1,000 voters vote, 501 of them can pass the constitutional amendment, and it becomes part of the Constitution. And we think of Constitution as permanent document. It is not something necessarily subject to review biannually by the state legislature. So let's talk about, Amani has already said what the mission of the Houston Voting Initiative is, so I don't have to repeat that. I like for people to grow their circle. So if you have a cell phone, take it out, scan the QR code that you're going to pledge to be engaged in the political process by actually filling out the information. we might text you or call you in an effort to get you to turn out and vote in the election, because it's so critical to have your voice, to be at the table. There's a famous analogy that said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yes,
And no one wants to be eaten today.
that's right.
No. Even though we have a great barbecue place,
That's right.
nobody wants to eat anything other than the barbecue, okay? So let's stick with that part. So on the ballot, I'm going to talk about the Constitution Amendment, but on the ballot, depending on where you live, there are Congressional District 18 and 17 proposed constitutional amendments, City Council at Large District 4, an at-large seat. There are 15 people running in that particular race. So of course, there's going to be a runoff in December for that. And you got the Houston City College has 3 board positions, and HISD, Houston Independent School District, has 3 positions as well. Even though the board is controlled by board of managers, and so that you're being elected, you will not really have any say and input. And in the surrounding metropolitan area, we have a number of elections in terms of school board, appraisal district. In Missouri City, they have this mayor and the city council. In surrounding areas, and they were just doing a news story. If you live in Cy-Fair, make sure you watch the news story about this Cy-Fair Board of Election that's happening in terms of Cy-Fair ISD. So these proposed amendments, critical to people, first and foremost, you need to know who represents you. So I always include that as part of it, that you scan it to find out who's representing you in the first place. The second part, the voters in Texas, and Texas is a very demographically diverse community, 40% Hispanic, Latino, 39% Anglo, about 12% African American, and about 6.5, almost 7% Asian. And so it's a majority minority state. However, the people who tend to turn out and vote in the elections are Anglo.
Yep. Yep.
Like for the city council races in the mayor contact, that 20% of the people may determine what everybody else is subject to in the city of Houston or even in Harris County. So people are not exercising. The vote is called a franchise because franchises tend to have value.
Mhm.
So if you had Gatlin's Barbecue had a franchise and a franchisee and opened up another location, that means they had a franchise fee to be paid.
Right.
So it's something of value.
Yep.
And in the state of Texas, you have a franchise tax that businesses have to pay. So putting it in that context, because sometimes people don't understand the political in relationship to the economic in terms of business. So the ballot box, as they said, the ballot is more mightier than the sword. So take that into account. And so we are in the process of ratification. Texas has had over 700 and some amendments proposed and 500 approved that are part of the Constitution in the state. Every 2 years when the legislature meet, they propose amendments, and then we get to go out and vote on them. Every 2 years, biennial, the state legislature meet, and that chart shows you the succession of amendments. Last time it was 14 amendments, 13 of them passed. This time we have 17. So I set it up to talk about these amendments in the context of 10 of the 17 amendments deal with property exemptions, eliminations, banning of taxes. 10 of the 17 things that are proposed in terms of constitutional amendment deal with things like that related to tax. And so that is critical and important. So when you make this decision, you're going to be voting on, you're either going to be voting on the limitation of the state legislature in the future to make decisions about things, because once it becomes a constitutional amendment, it negates you being able to act on it, and it's not subject to legislative scrutiny by anyone, usually, when you create something like that. And so Prop 5, I started with the property. I'm not going in sequential order because I think you need to talk about the property tax, the money part. The money part.
Yeah.
You know, the money is always what they follow the money. And when people say it's not about the money, it usually is about the money, because that is true. This amendment authorizes the legislature to exempt from ad valorem taxation tangible personal property consisting of animal feed. Every other institutional props structure that has stuff in inventory, pay property tax on, pay taxes on. But this is gonna exempt animal feed. They say it's been exempted from taxation from all other processes involved. But if you have an inventory on your shelf, it is being taxed. And you know, when the tax is declared, that you have to declare value for something at the first of the year. And so as a result of that, usually you have huge inventory during that time period. So they want to exempt that animal feed. So this benefits a subset of the population. Remember, all of this is about individuals in our state. How many people are involved in the animal feed industry and sell that product? So take that into account. So helps farms and ranchers. This is supposed to be, that's the pro side of that issue. The con side is it reduced property tax, shifting the burden to other taxpayers. So it moved that particular entity out of, and in communities where you have lots of farms and ranches, that means that can substantially reduce the property tax that the local government can collect to provide for goods, for services
Right.
that is rendered.
And schools.
And schools.
Yeah.
And concentrated loss of local tax collection. So this hamstrings the local government in terms of its ability to collect the taxes that it needs to provide the services that are critical.
And you said that tax is going to be put on the taxpayer or.
Well, if you're not paying it, you're exempt from it, then somebody else
Somebody else
picks
got
up
to
the
pay it,
tab.
right? They still got to get the money.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And so,
Something to think
remember the analogy that someone pays the piper who plays the tune? Somebody's got to pay
Somebody's got.
in some kind of way. In some kind of way. So Proposition 7 of surviving spouses, there was something called the PACT Act passed in 2022 that the national government passed dealing with veterans that died from burn pits or from Agent Orange or some other chemical exposure or something that, so the state of Texas, so they're trying to keep with that premise. And so if the person, the military spouse dies from a service-related injury and had a property tax exemption, then this is a way to transfer that property tax exemption to the surviving spouse.
Okay.
So when you think of this, and of course, we are very thankful for military people who serve and give so much in our community, because since we no longer have the draft, it's selective service, individually choose to go and be in the military in terms of the benefits. And so in this particular instance, it honors veterans by offering this as, you know, in terms of their property tax exemption, but it also the transfer it onto the surviving spouse if that happened. In military communities, more often than not, disabled or retired veterans live close to military bases where they can access the services that the military has to offer, such as healthcare and other kind of care. And so as a direct result of that, those communities may be more negatively impacted because they don't have access to that property tax revenue for that local expansion.
Question, what if the surviving spouse remarries?
Then they lose the
Good question.
exemption. They lose the exemption. If they remarry, they lose that exemption.
Thank you.
Good question.
They do. They lose that exemption. And limited revenue impact. The proposal suggested limited revenue impact, but in certain communities, it could have a more adverse impact. As I said, near military base, where a lot of people tend to live, to concentrate it so they can have access to the benefits that are being offered them. You stay near where you are to go in there for healthcare, to go buy groceries and things like that. So that local community would disproportionately be affected by that impact. And not disparaging or suggesting that military veterans don't deserve benefits, why that person is existed. And the other argument is that the surviving spouse has been part of making decisions, relocations, and all of that, and therefore they should be compensated. But one of the things too that nobody ever examines or talk about in a very expansive way is that if you're a disabled veteran and you're 100% disabled, you're getting huge benefits in terms of from the government.
Yep.
In terms of access to healthcare services, you're getting access to a monthly check payment, You can go to college for free. You can transfer that benefit to your children or to your spouse. There are lots of things that are happening that most people in the general public do not know happens in this process.
Right.
So take that into account
A
too.
question?
Mhm.
Would you by chance know how many military bases are in Texas? Like, is this a big thing? Oh, they've got a lot of bases.
Somebody can Google it. Come on. I think Fort Hood is the largest one in
Right.
Killeen. That's by far the biggest one.
Is it the largest?
Qua-
Is
Qua-
one on-
And then Lackland in Air Force Base in San Antonio is huge as well. Those are two that I know for different branches of service, because Fort Hood is the Army, Lackland is Air Force Base. It doesn't say how many?
14 active US military installations. Okay.
I know that came up at one point when people were talking about the possibility, and this is a tangent thing, so don't get out there and promote that I'm saying that. When people were talking about seceding from the United States, the question was, what were they going to do with all these military bases?
Right.
Because that means they would lose all that federal revenue and income that was coming into the state, so
Yep.
the state would have to make up for that differential. Exempt ad valorem taxing on income producing personal property. This would authorize the legislature to exempt from any ad valorem taxes a portion of the market value of a tangible personal property if you're using it for the production of income. Right now, it's $2,500. You have to itemize very closely and carefully. This would increase it to $125,000.
Oh, wow.
Like if you have a home office and you're using it to generate income or produce product, you usually have a very detailed statement. The pros is supposed to, it's gonna help the fiscal people who are doing the tax revenue in this sense, because you could just automatically take the deduction off hand and you won't have to go through all the intimate paperwork. But the con side is it cut local property tax revenue that we're talking about. So we're constantly talking about money.
Right.
Money, revenue. Money is the mother milk of politics, but it also is what the state legislature's primary responsibility is every 2 years is to create a budget and allocate resources for doing things.
And it stands to reason that if these entities don't have to pay taxes for whatever reason, because the municipality still needs the taxes, it's going to end up going to the individual family to cover those taxes that these other people are no longer paying.
Yeah, somebody else has to
Gotta
make up
gotta make up for it.
the revenue source that we're talking about.
Yeesh.
The other one, Proposition 10, deals with if your house is completely destroyed by fire, then you can take an exemption because you can't live in the house, whereas before you have to pay whatever the assessed value of the tax that happened in January, your house burned down in February or whatever, you still would have to pay. But this is giving an exemption. My question is the broader context, and I didn't look this up to find out. What happens if the same thing happens by storm? What happens
Right.
if flood wash away your house? What happens if a hurricane come and blow your house away? Because quite literally during Katrina, it removed houses off their foundation.
Right.
So what happens in those instances? Would those individuals also be eligible for that same kind of exemption? So you have to ask these questions. These are questions to ask as an informed citizen and as a taxpayer in the community.
Who would you ask?
Who would you ask?
Yes, ma'am.
If that, you probably could Google it and find out. I wouldn't trust AI to totally
That's
in
right.
terms of
What I-
asking that question, because
Right.
sometimes you get an answer. I had a student to do that, and he went into Chat GPT, and I never thought of Chat GPT as a place that you would go to ask who represents you. But he did, and he came back and he said, Jarvis Johnson. I said, well, he's no longer in the state legislature, so he's not representing anybody.
That's right.
So that information you received is inaccurate. So trust but verify. That was Reagan's famous line.
And I think it's interesting that they actually use the word fire.
Right.
As opposed
Yeah.
to catastrophic.
Acts of God or anything like that. Yes, ma'am. Especially when we was that girl.
Yes.
And again, verify, what she said earlier, I put it out there based on being a insurance agent with all of them, just involved. I think they specifically said fire because, things are covered in insurance policies, but but that it didn't, that fire didn't protect it, that it didn't cover the fire. Like,
Really? If so,
like, yeah,
So
like,
my
right
house
now,
burned down, the insurance didn't cover that?
it covered it, but not to the level that this is doing. Like for instance, because right now on the property I have, because it had water damage and it was proven from the storm last year or whatever, then I got back pay for rent, loss and rental income, that kind of stuff. Sometimes fires don't necessarily get covered in that degree in insurance policy.
Don't they provide for housing and stuff like that? Cause I know when we had something, I think.
I had, well, this is in Alabama, and I had rental property. And it was destroyed by fire, and they actually paid the lost income. So,
So lost income is one, but I'm saying, trust me what I'm saying, as an appraisal. Stuff with fire, cause it's easy to trace water damage and assume like the adjuster, he couldn't say if it wasn't upkept right, because there's language in the policy that says, if you've done anything to mitigate this water damage, then we could, whatever, and we got a good adjuster, so he could say it was storm related, not because it's not necessarily the same type of thread with fire.
Right.
Just like the 15 club that got burnt down, it was obvious arson, they had the video, but the owner did not get paid out insurance wise. Like he would had it been like a storm or anything like that. He's still fighting some of those things, even though they captured somebody, he hasn't been convicted, but he still had to pump a lot of money out of pocket for the insurance claim.
Wow.
Even though they knew it was arson, it was not his fault.
Was that because of his deductible for the property or?
No, it wasn't. So it could be a lot of things, but trust me when I say a fire is not as aggressively covered in the insurance industry. And my three daughters work in the different areas, underwriter, the purse, the one who pays the claim, and the one who works with the adjusters. And they talk about this kind of stuff all the time.
Wow.
So supposedly this is only a temporary loss of income, so local government shouldn't, and schools shouldn't be overly concerned. So
It's just, like I said, with your point, I like the fact that you have the pros and cons. It's be informed and however you feel about this, how it affects your life or whatever.
Right.
Go to court, the information is there, but as a person that deals with the insurance industry, you know, we care about it to cover it, but it's not as covered as itemized as other claims.
well, the Texas Legislative Council said not a single person spoke in opposition to this proposed constitutional amendment.
Okay.
Whereas they actually, and I will share the link so you can share it out with the other people who are members, that it can be posted. It actually shows, it's a compilation of arguments in support and opposition. They said nobody spoke in opposition to this one. No one.
But if we know that they were.
Do we know to speak out?
What?
So that we know.
Did the general public know about it?
The
Against
Texas
or for.
Well, you have to, there are people who track legislation and provide to their constituency group. That is one of the things that the Houston.
That's what they
Voting
say
Unit
they
hope to do in the
To your
future.
point earlier, it is our job
Responsibility.
to be, I mean, it's only one representative per hundreds of thousands of people.
Right.
So we, have to be better in having these conversations on a more consistent basis, not just around the election when the information is muddled. We gotta think about our community. I use myself. I got divorced at 28, had 5 children. Man, listen, I was busy. I stayed engaged because that's just who I was, and my job function made me stay engaged because I wrote grants for the oil and gas industry. So I had to be engaged, right?
Yeah.
But I was the one that would inform my family, my community, because they were busy. They were overwhelmed. Life was life.
Yeah.
So we have to do as advocates a better job of having these forums consistently, at least once a month.
Oh, Lord, and that's asking too
I
much.
would. And that's the problem. They think it's asking too much, but you just said that why we ain't being informed. So you got to decide.
That's
You
real.
got to decide. You got to decide.
Some of us just don't have the time to do all of this.
You said you gotta make time for it.
But
No.
It does require time to be engaged and to know about what's happening. And since so many things are happening during that 140-day legislative session, keeping track of every nuance and the constitutional amendments, since it requires a 2/3 vote, some people argue that that means that more eyes are looking on it to actually get to come out. Whereas to pass a piece of legislation, the threshold is much smaller, that there is more scrutiny given to this particular issue than others. And so take that into account.
So Dr. Johnson, is there a way that the community can be made aware of something that is being voted on to be a proposition? It's like, how do we get, as a community, how do we get in front of it?
Well, you can go to the state legislative website and you can sign up and they will track legislation and send you notification and you
Oh,
can
okay.
watch. You
Okay.
can actually watch recordings of what's happening in then time. It's
Okay.
only in session for 140 days unless they call a special session. So yes, you can actually watch it on your television, on your computer. You can have access to that information, real live time, hearings and all of that.
I am a senior citizen. The rest of the senior citizens who are more senior, more seasoned than I am, they can't follow that.
in my community, when I was living in Hidden Valley, I just recently moved, but I made sure my dad, that community.
You're the exception.
Yeah,
Oh, she can say
well,
that.
that's because
But I like
but that's because I'd rather other organizations, I'm not the exception, and that's the perception I'm working to get away from, because if we keep that mindset, other people would want to partner. So I do this, but I partner with other organizations that do something different. She does voting engagement, I'm not gonna go as deep as she is,
Right.
but I have partners
Right,
that will.
right.
That's their initiative.
Yeah.
I have a partner that's justice involved, that follows justice legislation. I have another partner that's physically sound. I have another partner that follows Houston in action, voting. I have another partner. So we work together.
Right, you have to, because it's so much.
You have to.
Yeah.
I'm a grant writer, so when it comes to money,
Oh, I need her.
they
You got a partner?
right? Because I'm a real grant writer.
Sister, that here in this way.
Yeah, I know, right?
I mean, in the 60s, and if we said this for one thing, it looked like we didn't have power, but when we come together, there is power of even in this room. So I'm just saying, we got to come together and find a way.
So, Doc, where do we go to make sure that we can get those updates on what's happening? What website do we go to?
We're to the Texas legislative session. Look it up right quick.
You can Google, it's actually Texas Legislature Online
Mhm.
-texas.gov. But if you type in Texas Legislative Session,
Uh-huh.
it will take you to that website.
But they are only in session now biannually. So that means they've had their session this year in 2025. They will not have another session to 2027. So that's when they will be back in session 2 years ago.
Oh, wow, I'm disappointed that in the last several years I haven't seen that. But honestly, I mean, people may not like him right now, but Commissioner Ellis, when he was in session, the Senate, he would partner with even Senator Miles before he was even a senator, he was a business owner, right? They would have quarterly sessions at ACC. We could go down there and we were always ahead of things. Love her or not, State Rep Jolanda Donald,
Mm-hmm.
I would go to her stuff because she would tell what her community, when she got in office, no matter what office she was in, whether it was HISD, she would have regular information sessions for the community that she served.
Well, they still do that. They still do that. And in addition to that, other organizations invite
Right.
people to come and speak to their group about certain kind of issues that they are concerned about. If it's women, reproductive rights and maternal health, they do that. or if it's something else, they do that. Thank you for coming. So they do that. Those sessions do happen and take place still. Those things are happening. Usually your legislator sends something out to your newsletter. They might do it electronically, or they might do it in paper to tell you about what's going on. So, but as a citizen, this Benjamin Franklin said, the lady asked him, what did you do? And he said, we created a republic, if you can keep it. And he's letting citizens know that they have a responsibility in this process too, to be engaged, to know what's going on. We have a responsibility to maintain the democratic system. That means we have to do something. We can't sit on the sideline. As I said, democracy is not a spectator sport.
Yep.
You know, you have to get engaged. And so the homestead exemption for elderly or the disabled, it takes into account, it assumes that elderly people and disabled people on a fixed income, and therefore they need some additional property tax relief. That's inherent in that assumption. For the reduced taxable base and local rent. This reduces, the con side is it reduces taxable base and local income for things in the community. It does that. And the fiscal impact, they suggest that it's moderate on the school because the perception is that the state will make up the differential.
Okay.
However, when there's an economic downturn and you have less revenue coming, and eventually every state, the country has an economic downturn, what we call a recession or something like that.
Right.
That means the reduced income coming into the state. That means the state is going to reduce the income it's going to give to local governments as well to make up for this differential. That doesn't mean that the cost for doing what you're doing went down,
Right.
because there's a recession. You still have to pay your employees. You still have to provide basic city services or county services or appraisal district services or whatever kind of service. Those things are still on the table.
So when a proposition is proposed, do you by any chance know if the person who is proposing, if they're saying this group needs tax relief or pay less taxes, but it's going to affect this tax base, are the proposers, do they have to show where the money's going to come from? If you're talking about taking money from a certain pot, we can replace it by, but do they have to do that at all?
Well, increasingly, the whole thing about property tax has been on the agenda consistently. For I think the last 3 legislative sessions, there's been this huge thing to reduce property tax for people because rising prices, rising appraisal rates for property, that has been one of the consistent issues. Texas does not have income tax, as in 40 some other states do.
Right.
So property tax is the primary fund of cities,
Right.
counties,
I got you. Yes.
school districts, compared to in other places with a state income tax.
Yeah.
And there's the emphasis in a few. And we voted on a constitutional amendment, I think not the last session, a couple of sessions ago, that we would ban the idea of having an income tax. The people in the state voted to ban the idea of ever having an income tax.
Right.
So that's off the table. So, but however, in other states that have an income tax, they have a more stable base of income, and in how it's awarded disproportionately in the state. Texas is considered one of the 8th largest economy in the world, but it has one of the most regressive tax system because the primary source of revenue is sales tax. And it disproportionately, the bottom 20% of the population is disproportionately affected compared to the top 1%.
Wow.
And so people at the bottom 20%, spend more of their income in terms of sales tax revenue because they buy things in terms of revenue than the top 1% in terms of assets when we start talking about assets.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different conversation to have in terms of that. But people need to look at the total picture. People don't, when you're proposing something to happen in the state legislature, you personally are not asking for all the buts, ands, and are.
Mhm.
You're saying, this is why I need this,
Right.
and you're giving your rationale.
Right.
So if nobody speaks in opposition to it, or nobody come up with a counter argument, what happens? When you put something on the table and no one can come up with sufficient counter
I get
argument,
voted for.
it more
Yeah.
often than not.
Yeah.
So
It's passed to us.
Yeah.
When they say-
So the next question, do you prefer, what do you prefer to be called? Yeah. Yeah, okay. But I have to- Okay.
another proposal is the Prop 13. Increases the resident homestead exemption from 100,000 to 140,000. So if you combine that with from the 10,000 to the 60,000, the amendment that I just talked about, that would exempt, if passed, over $200,000 in tax exemption for homeowners. And I know anything in real estate, they said this would create an economic climate where people will buy houses and it will stimulate the economy in that way, because if you buy a house, you got to buy furniture, economic growth and development. But at the same time, what this does is it could disproportionately affect younger people in terms of buying in the marketplace. Elderly people who we assume, for some unknown reason, we assume that they have less income than other people do. But if you look at the data, that is not an accurate reflection that the elderly people have less income. The baby boomers in particular, $10,000 was retiring every month. And so they actually had a higher assets and values than other population groups. So we need to evaluate that in that context. So per household, you could conceivably, as a result of these amendments to the Constitution, have a $200,000 exemption for your homestead.
Mm.
But there is never going to be a day, I heard someone say the other day, there's a possibility you might get a property tax, get a property notice, tax notice, and you'll have zero property tax. That is never going to happen in this universe. So don't even buy into that narrative. Another proposal is a property tax exemption for Border County. People who have property in Border County that become advantaged by the government building structures or doing something to up security, and therefore that increase the value of their property. They want to build in an exemption. This amendment is to build an exemption for them, so they won't have to pay extra tax on this added value that has occurred as a result of improvements on their property. Border County, only in border counties.
So this should benefit all developers. Okay, that's another rabbit hole.
So it's going to reduce property tax base in border county, only in border county. So what this would do, local revenue losses in these border regions will happen. So county and local government, local infrastructure investment along the border, they say it would increase that. But at the same time, the local government units would actually lose revenue as an exemption. Every time there is an exemption, somebody might benefit, but if the institution of government loses income, and they still have to provide the same services they've always provided.
And the constituents end up paying for that.
Well, other people could end up, the burden could be actually shifted to other people in that community. So this is the transition. I'm transitioning here from, we were talking about individuals, tax exemption, we had seed, we had farm animal seed, we had whatever, animal feed. Then we had all the things dealing with individuals' in property. Before I move on, I want to say this too, that this does not translate to renters.
Okay.
The assumption is inherent in this idea, there's a trickle-down economic theory that property owners would transfer this saving to renters.
Another Reagan thing.
And I use that term specifically for that reason,
Yeah.
that the assumption is, but that's not necessarily what will happen here.
Right.
That any savings will be passed on to renters. So if you have a surplus and you're trying to help the whole population, then there seems to be, and one of the arguments in the Texas Legislative Council's report and the proposed condensed version say, the opposition said, well, you're not doing anything to benefit people who are renters. None of this affects them. in a positive.
And I would assume that there are more renters than homeowners.
Usually there are, yes.
Yes.
So the state capital gains inheritance tax, these are taxes, Proposition 2, 6, and 8, deal with things that are not already in place in the state of Texas. There is no provision in the state for capital gains, realized and unrealized. There is no statutory legislation that deals with that, nothing to deal with inheritance. None of those things are already on the table. And so someone is thinking forward in the futuristic planning process. The potential, the major con associated with any of these is that it would potentially hamstring the future legislators from acting and limiting the source of revenue that they can actually acquire through taxation. If you put it in the Constitution, this bans the idea of using it unless you amend the Constitution again.
Right.
And once something is in, it's hard to get out. And so the doubtful nature of it, because everybody wants a tax reduction, nobody wants a tax increase. When you tell people like that, people automatically say, yeah, I want my taxes to go down. Automatic.
Right.
But Oliver Wendell Holmes said taxes are the price that we pay for a civilized society.
Right.
So if you want schools, you want roads, you want infrastructure,
Yes.
somebody has to pay for it. It doesn't magically appear.
Yep.
So in that sense, so capital gain locks in tax-free status for realized or unrealized capital gain, limit flexibility for future policy adjustments. If the state needs to come up with a new revenue source, so sales tax is the primary source of revenue at some futuristic point at the scale, take into account population growth. There are over 30 million plus people in the state of Texas. From looking at some of the data, it says 1,600 people are moving to Texas every day. So the potential impact of growth and the projection for population in the future. So what impact would this have? No immediate revenue impact because Texas already does not have capital gains tax. It doesn't already happen. So people are thinking about in the future what could happen. Prohibit securities occupation tax. One of the things that's going to happen is Texas is getting a stock exchange.
Okay.
And they want the opportunity to have other stock exchanges to locate here in Texas. And so this is to bar any future taxes on any transaction, financial transactions. So the pro side is that this actually continues the business-friendly atmosphere that the state of Texas already has in terms of luring business to come here because it's very low tax and business friendly. The con side is that it removes a future revenue source, as I've said continuously, that this means that in the future, state legislators cannot decide, even if it's in the overall economic best interest of the state to come up with a new source of revenue, this will not be on the table for them to consider. And there's no immediate impact because this is not an issue at all right now. This doesn't even exist as an issue.
Well, if there are more people moving here, that means that more services are going to be required. It means you're going to need more money.
Infrastructure.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And for local communities, they will be disproportionately affected depending on where the people move to.
Yeah.
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 And so that means this is revenue store. Ban estate tax. I think people probably remember in the 90s, in the 2000s, the infamous phrase death taxes. So being able to transfer your assets to your relatives without any taxes, because the argument is that you've already paid taxes on it.
Right.
So you don't need to double taxation when the person died.
Yeah.
So this is but this is taking this off the table in the future. Some states do have a estate tax. Some states do. The national government has an estate tax that when you die and depending on the value of your estate, you have to pay so much in taxes. So here, this bans estate taxes. The state of Texas will not be able to institute an estate tax in terms of transferring of wealth from one person to the other. I remember I was teaching in 2000 when students were talking about the infamous death tax, and I asked them, they were in there talking about the death tax. I said, well, go home and ask your parents how much assets they have. What if they added everything up that they have? How much? Is it worth $1.5 million? That's what our starting point here. $650,000 at almost $700,000 for one person, but two people, $1.6 million. I said, come back and tell me, will your family be affected by that? And most of them, overwhelmingly in this country, only a very small, minuscule part of the population is affected by that state tax. They are. Limits long-term revenue, so the state will not be able to tap into this source of revenue in the future, even if it's needed. No current tax exists on inheritance right now in terms of an estate, so we're futuristically prognosticating about what might happen in the future. But you're trying to stop it before it ever happens, or even be considered as part of the discussion.
Trust. Putting property in trust, kind of protect from that.
Yes.
That's okay.
And they said one of the gains in terms of capital gains, that business could set up a trust
Right.
and they might be able to keep from paying the franchise tax if they move it over to a trust, which would eliminate the current source of revenue that the state has from franchise tax.
And all that goes into understanding
Yeah,
the game.
yeah, I do trust, but as far as that.
Yeah, because for the most,
It sounds like there's a trust of that.
well, and families put trust too to protect their assets from,
That, yeah. That.
well, not Medicare, Medicaid.
Well, Medicare would also put it on the.
Medicare does not pay for nursing home care or anything like that.
They don't.
No.
But if you use, like the seniors, have like my dad, case in point, my dad. Medicare has got in on the game too, along with Medicaid, where, if your trust is not active for like 2 years and you have a catastrophic, like my dad had a catastrophic medical thing, where he was pulling on both Medicare and Medicaid, because some things are Medicare driven, but it's under a Medicaid number, right? They were crossing the borders. I know Medicare, tried to put a lien. So I good enough to get the statement that said, oh, no. Because the claimant he did. And that's unconditional.
You sure they weren't acting under the behest of Medicaid? Because I know they can take your property.
Medicaid, like, you know,
Like-
where if you had, you know, some things Medicare will pay for, because people are not wise enough to get like the Advantage plan with Medicare and supplement. And so they build up a whole lot of finances that they owe Medicare. Owe through Medicare, so if they didn't pay for, especially seniors who miss paying for their Part D, didn't sign up in time. They said they 67 and they can't, you know, that's a whole nother, you know.
Oh, yeah, I know that your benefits for Medicare
Yeah.
will be higher if you don't sign up within that window threshold that you're supposed to. You're gonna always pay a higher premium for Medicare.
My job got more aggressive on Medicare in the last 2 years. I you know, after trying to recoup or whatever.
Payout, okay.
What is an inactive trust? How does the person know what trust is they have?
See, you gotta have a workshop on that and get people to.
Oh, yeah, I need to bring her back because there's so many things.
But
that you
legal,
don't-
a legalese person too, a lawyer to come in and talk about exactly how you set them up in the different types, because it's more than one type.
So legally.
Yeah.
Not right now, because they're going through a transition.
Right.
I'll let you come from there, yeah. But eventually,
We'll find out.
yeah, eventually, yes, ma'am. Yeah, this is a big deal.
So,
Actually, the public, you just talk to that.
Okay.
well, public safety and judicial reform, Proposition 3 and 12. Proposition 3, judges may deny bail for violent crime. That's already the case.
Yeah.
Period. Requires clear and convincing evidence of a threat of flight risk. Applies to murder, assault, and trafficking. So this constitutional amendment is an attempt to put in place that basically, I don't know whether you paid attention to the 2024 election and lots of ads about these liberal judges or these judges doing. Actually, the Constitution guarantees you a right to that they can't set unreasonable bails or fines and things like that. and to preclude you from having access, because remember, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
You haven't been convicted of anything. You've simply been accused of doing something.
Right.
And to preclude you from having your due process. But now this amendment is going to set parameters for specific types of crime in advance that judges will have to adhere to in terms of no bail. But supposedly you will have to have a judicial hearing
Right.
so that you, as a countermeasure to supposedly protect the due process right. Just as a caveat to this, sometimes the person is arrested and they cannot afford to post bail. So they end up serving the time in jail,
Right.
a greater amount of time than it would be if they was tried and convicted for the offense in which they are being held for.
Right.
So that the idea of jail overcrowding is one of the con positions that's been offered on that more people will be locked up for indeterminate amounts of time. Some other states have started similar practices and procedures to ban bail, but judges can set bail to such an extremely high rate that the defendant will not be able to post bail and get out, period. But this also could lead to overcrowding in the jail system too, that you would have a lot of people locked up without the possibility of bail. And remember, they have not been convicted of doing a crime. So we have to always take into account due process procedures.
And who determines if a bail amount is too much? Isn't that on the judge? So it's always up to the judge's discretion.
The judge, well, the prosecutor can make some recommendations and then the judge ultimately decide what the bail will be set in the court.
So the person that has to pay it, what did they say? Well, that's excessive.
It probably won't carry much
Right,
weight.
yeah.
That means they'll probably end up being in. But a couple crimes, actually in 2021, several crimes happened in Harris County that they used as the basis for deciding that a person who had gotten out on bail committed another crime. And so that's the basis for this constitution.
Right.
And usually, even the one that they just sent to, Judge Naya, I'm sorry, her name, but they just sanctioned a judge saying that she was personally involved in decision to give somebody who was accused of a capital punishment crime bail, and he got in trouble, again, before he ever went to trial, he reoffended or did something else. They're now using her.
As an example.
As an example, and they actually sanctioned her. And they're really going after, it's made to look like the Republicans are really going after these liberal judges,
I wonder what the percentage, I wonder what the percentage of those.
We have to have a conversation offline about that. Proposition 3, but Proposition 12, Judicial Conduct Commission. For almost the last 3 constitutional amendment cycles, there have been amendments proposed to the Constitution dealing with the judicial system. Last time it was raising the retirement age for judges. That was the only amendment failed. That was the only amendment. Before that, it was changing the qualifications for judges. And that was in 2021. And allegedly, it was directly in response to what happened in 2018 in Harris County, that all those judges got elected.
Right.
And so changing the qualifications for what your qualifications had to be in order to serve to run and serve on the judicial court. So the Judicial Conduct Commission, right now there are 13 positions on this commission. The governor gets to appoint so many of them, and the Supreme Court justices get to appoint people from different courts. This change would allow the governor to appoint even more of them. And the Bar Association is involved here. The Bar Association gets to put 2 people on there, that they would remove that power from the Texas Bar Association, period.
If they just take all the responsibility, they just announce the Bar Association, well, that's accreditation. They're taking the power for them. They're moving accreditation from under the Bar Association and putting it in the hands of government. But anyway, I guess that's another day. For another day.
Yeah, yes, definitely need to talk about the Bar Association and their standing and how people perceive the Bar Association in that whole equation in terms of judicial nominations and the whole process that's involved there.
So if
They're trying to take over the bar association does the accreditation.
Yes,
And they're trying to remove that power from them. If they have not already done that.
they who,
The state.
that's the same.
government.
so if you have a conservative, right wing, right leaning governor, then that's going to affect the kinds of judges that people have to go in front of. And then if those judges are right wing, right leaning, then the typical grassroots poor person is probably not gonna get a lot of justice.
The possibility exists with this particular amendment is that it transfer more power to the governor. The idea of partisanship playing a role, political cronyism. And so in terms of weighing the system, and if a judge is deemed whatever because of this imbalance of power, not the judicial side is deciding, but the governor, because of his unusual amount of power in this equation, he will have the appointment of 7 people on the commission.
That's dangerous.
And the Supreme Court justice actually have the power to appoint 6. So we have to take this into account, that it could totally change the power, transfer power from the judicial aspect to the executive branch. And especially if you're a long-term serving governor, that governor has appointed almost everybody to the commissions and positions of power in the state anyway. So that strengthened the power of that particular, the executive.
And it's amazing to me how all of this goes back to the importance of voting. Because
Absolutely.
God knows that if you're not paying attention, you don't vote. Jesus Lord.
This is a conversation of who is on the certifying committee, who
Yeah.
certifies our vote.
Yeah.
If it's Republican, I don't care how blue Harris County is, I don't have, if the ones, if the legislation is serving, the congressional members that are serving in Texas State are red, guess what? We voted for Trump. Whether you want to or not, our electoral college, our members. And guess who appoints those? Yeah, I mean, we don't even talk about how those members are appointed as a way to inspire people to get out and vote.
Well, usually the state legislature appoint the people as
Right.
both, but the state legislature, that was the original formation process in the Constitution. However, since that time period, what happens is the parties, the 2 political parties get to appoint a slate of electors. And if the candidate of their party wins that state
Right.
popular vote, then that's the slate of electors that actually get to cast a ballot in December, which is almost 6 weeks after the election, to decide that particular equation.
I looked at the numbers were over the last several cycles. I understand what you said, that down to power. You know.
Well, that's-
Right, and it's real too.
Well, the electoral college was set up like that in the Constitution, and the provision is still in the Constitution.
Right.
And unless it's altered, that's the way it is. But actually, the state legislature conceded the power from themselves to the party. So the Democratic Party gets to appoint a slate of electors, because Texas has 40 electoral college votes. And then the Republican Party gets to choose a slate of electors. And if the candidate receives the majority of votes in the state of Texas, the Republican candidate, then that slate, the Republican electors get to go to the state capitol in Austin in December to cast a vote. If the Democratic candidate won, then they would get to go to Austin and cast a vote.
Right.
The framework for that electoral process has been set up in the Constitution. There've only been minor tinkering with it since the day that happened. The last tinkering was giving the District of Columbia 3 electoral college votes because people in DC couldn't vote for president, and that was in 1961.
Right.
That's the last real tinkering with the electoral college that has occurred in our constitutional framework. Yeah, so those are things that just didn't happen overnight.
Right.
And they have been in place for a very long time. And only recently, more contemporary, I would say probably since 2000, have we had more people raising concerns about the Electoral College and its functionality. More so then than any other time.
Conversations happening, but trickle down and see
Yep.
that our vote matters.
Yeah.
But here's a trickle up thing. it affects everything across the board, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I mean by,
Yeah.
we need to look at that, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially when times and times about election fraud, that's all I'm saying, you know? And how, we need to understand what really happened versus even a rhetoric of election fraud.
Yeah, we can, and you should definitely have
Yes, ma'am.
a session
Yes.
on that in
Yeah.
terms of people talking about the electoral college and some of the suggested reforms that may need to take place. But either you have to do it by constitutional amendment, or state by state would have to institute a practice within their state to decide to do something differently to alter it.
Right.
That's, I mean, and you need the threshold for getting a constitutional amendment approved. We have not had one approved since the 27th Amendment in 1991.
Yep.
So I think we are,
Yeah.
take that into account. The technical, I don't know whether anybody been watching television. Probably I watch it far too often for recreational purposes more so than the news. I read the news. I watch television pretty much for entertainment. But recently I saw an ad for the technical college system, Texas State Technical College System. And there's a proposal, Proposition 1, on the ballot. It's a proposed constitutional amendment that creates 2 new funds for tech colleges, infrastructure fund and a workforce education fund. And there are 11,000 students that are involved in this process right now, that in terms of Texas State Technical College, where there are 700,000 students in community colleges and technical college.
Okay.
And so this is going to create a fund for capital by land and do infrastructure and build out for capacity for workforce training. On the counter argument is that why should businesses be able to train their own people to do the work that they want? Why should the public tax dollars be used to fund that? That's one of the questions that's being asked. And you're removing this from the legislative appropriation process on a biannual basis. So you're setting up this trust fund pretty much that will not be subject to legislative scrutiny because it's constitutional.
Hmm.
And so the legislature will not get a chance to debate or talk about this biannually, every other year when they're in session. This will no longer be on the table.
Wow.
And so that's one of the things that it eliminates transparency. It eliminates the legislator's ability to be able to think about the issues that need to be addressed in the local community, because this is off the table. There's a fund, a trust fund and then guess what? There has to be somebody over this fund that will get to decide who's going to get the money and how they're going to get the money.
Right.
So we're building an infrastructure, a bureaucracy,
Mhm.
a bureaucratic process. And it benefits exclusively for businesses. Not that that's a negative, because you want economic prosperity and all of those things, but take that into account. And it provides dedicated funding for capital needs of the Texas State Technical College System outside of the standard budgeting process. So every 2 years, this will not come up for scrutiny and people can get to ask questions, because this exists over here out of that process.
So how often does it come up for scrutiny?
It doesn't,
Never, ever, ever.
not really. Once you establish this, yeah, you're establishing an extra jurisdictional body that's over this.
Does it seem like a bad idea
Uh,
to never be able to scrutinize? Because they change.
well, sometimes they put things in place that will say, this after 10 years, this will no longer exist or something like
Right.
that. And so sometimes that happened, but so far, they said the technical state college technical system has not been able to grow and prosper in the way that it should, because it has no property tax basis. You can't levy a property tax. So it doesn't have a steady revenue stream, that they have to go to the legislature every 2 years and ask for funding and money. 11,000 students are part of that system,
Mhm.
whereas 700,000 students are part of the community college system.
Right.
So if you look at the two things, they are not necessarily equivalent.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sales tax for water fund. After the sales tax reaches a certain threshold, then money will be transferred to the water fund to create a water fund. long-term $20 billion launching in 2027. So when the legislature is in session the next time, it will automatically start transferring money to this water fund. And there's a water board. The governor gets to select the people who serve on this board. And so this is also an opportunity for political cronyism and political. And part of this proposal, I didn't see anything that specifically focused on conservation. And there is nothing that suggests that we're addressing global climate change.
Right.
Because some areas in Texas are experiencing severe drought.
Yep.
And so that means water. And economically, what does that mean when we use certain kind of oil and gas, or when they're using fracking procedures to use a tremendous amount of water?
Right.
What impact would that have on water? And with the number of people moving to the state, 1,600 a day, that the demand for water, the demand for construction, the demand for these things, what's the long-term economic impact? So we need to evaluate. Citizens need to look at each one of these amendments very closely and carefully, look at the pros and cons, and make a determination. Do I vote for this?
Right. And how's it going to affect me?
And how it's going to affect me in the long term. And this is the extra jurisdictional body. This is not under the state legislature providing scrutiny. It directs $1 billion from sales tax revenue to state water fund, applies after collection exceed $46.5 billion, and it's adjustable with a 2/3. You can adjust it with a 2/3 legislative vote.
It's a slush fund. There is no oversight. Those mud districts are considered their own municipal.
No oversight.
Authorities.
Wow.
There's no oversight. That is a slush fund.
It's slush fund.
You know more about it than I do, so go with that. Another one is the Dementia Research, Proposition 14, the Dementia Research Institute. A few years ago, we set up an energy fund in the legislature as a constitutional amendment. People voted for it, and that exists. Then last legislative session in 2023, we set up a Cancer Institute fund with the idea that Texas was going to be on the cutting edge of cancer research. And this is Dementia Research Institute. In all fairness, my husband and I, this disclaimer, Albert and I are involved with Alzheimer's Association. And the Alzheimer people are very excited about this proposal, and they think people should vote. Because the idea of dedicated funds to do research, prevention, all kinds of things exist. On the other hand, this friend of mine suggested, and we read all through all this and all of the arguments, this does set up a bureaucratic structure.
Yeah.
That somebody gets to be appointed, you get to have people who work for it administratively. So why not just give the money directly to people who are already involved in research?
Right.
Why not appropriate money directly to Baylor, to UT, to U of H?
Answer that question. Why not do that?
So why not do that? So that's the question to ask. Instead of setting up an infrastructure, an institute with people appointed to make these decisions.
It seems to be unnecessary.
Separate and apart. I'm saying that people need to ask questions like that. Because this is removing something from the regular appropriation process as well.
For people to ask the right questions. Their own conclusions.
That's right. I'm just saying these are things that you should ask.
Yeah.
Research and prevention of dementia. So people are already doing that type of research. So how do you promote the idea of making sure in terms of Parkinson's disease, that Alzheimer's, dementia, and admittedly that in the African-American community, we tend to be disproportionately affected by it. So in terms of research and development. Parental rights and citizenship. These are the last two, so we're going to cover this quickly. Parental rights and citizenship. The question is, why do we need these two amendments added to the Constitution in the first place? Parents already have rights. Except in Texas, the parents can't approve gender affirming therapy for their children. The state does not allow that. But other than that, parents have lots of rights with regard to their children, making a decision whether they're gonna have them immunized. And in this past legislative session, they decided that parents would even have more rights. If they don't want to immunize their kids, they don't have to.
Right.
So those are some of the issues that come up. But parental rights, why does it need to be enshrined in the Constitution? It's already statutory provisions and already national legislative laws that deals with parental rights that already exist. And so it says it grants fundamental rights to parents, responsibility, care, custody, and protection. They already have that. And unless there's a problem, in this amendment, the con side suggests that children may not be protected. Children may not have rights as a direct result of enshrining in the Constitution. If there is parental abuse happening to the children, are you able to report it?
Mhm.
Since it said parents have custodial primary rights and whatever, can you report if you suspect something is happening? Can you report that? And how does that play out? So that is one of the other. In Colorado, they rejected a similar amendment in 1996, but now, 30 years later, Texas thinks it's a great idea. So some things go around and then they come back around.
Right.
Just have to pay attention to when they come back around.
Which is why nothing should be permanent.
And so it may obstruct, one of the cons also is may obstruct public health and educational intervention. That parents will be able to go into the school and say that my kid can be exposed to this book, this kind of instruction, this, and this. I don't want my child in a classroom with this child here because this child is whatever.
Yeah.
So this could impact the educational process, period. And so we have to think about these things, that this could totally, we are having disruptions in public education already, some serious ones. This might actually add to the confusion that's already occurring.
Parents having powers and hands, people who don't know how to use the thing.
Only want to use it for certain groups.
And although I always contend that information empowers people to make decisions, informed decisions that will affect their community in a more positive way, misinformation affects communities too.
Yeah.
And have people becoming advocates for things that may not be based in facts. So it's a countermeasure. Misinformation and disinformation play critical roles now in our society. And there are some people believe everything they see on the internet. I have some friends who do believe everything they see, and it's not always productive or constructive for them to have that belief system. Citizenship voting. And I have to tell you this because the Houston Chronicle said that maybe people need to vote for this amendment. But we already have a provision said that we need to vote for it. The Constitutional Amendment clarifying that a voter must be a United States citizen. We already have national legislation that deals with that. And the statutory laws here in Texas already says that. I didn't bring any of the voter registration cards, but it has something on the penalty of law. If you register, if you sign the card, fill it out, and you're attesting that you're not a citizen and all that, then you're breaking the law.
Right.
There are already provisions in place. This is to counter, in some states, they are allowing people who are not citizens to vote in local elections because they have children who go to school.
Right.
And they are affected by city services decisions.
Yeah.
And so in some cities, they have allowed individuals to vote on measures that affect the local school district or the local government in those areas. And this is to get ahead of that, allegedly, because they don't want it to come to Texas. In some states, they are doing that. It's more symbolic than substantive. And as I said, the Houston Chronicle said, maybe vote for it. And I don't want to misquote them, but this might prevent some other additional legislation from being passed that could be hamper or negatively affect people's ability to vote. Now, over the last few legislative sessions, SB1, we've had quite a few pieces of legislation introduced and passed, and some of them are still in court. dealing with voting rights and individuals' right to vote. And the Supreme Court is just heard the other day on October 15th, a case in Louisiana in terms of redistricting. They are having hearings dealing with the redistricting plan in Texas and El Paso right now. They started on October 1st, hearing about the redistricting plan in the state of Texas. So these are issues in terms of voting and participating in the political process. If you sit on the sideline, things happen to you.
Yeah, you're on the menu. You're on the menu.
But if you get in the arena, you might be able to negate some of the things that would be coming down the pipeline, because you can clearly do things to people when they're sitting on the sideline, not engaged and not voting their interest or not attempting to engage in the political process. It's easy to do things. And so it is imperative that each of us do our due diligence. And I know it takes a lot of time to be an actively engaged citizen in the public, in the civic square, but it is all of our responsibility. He said, as Benjamin Franklin said, it's a democracy. He said, a republic if you can keep it. So each of us bears the responsibility for actually doing our part to ensure that we keep it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, before we close this thing out, does anybody have any questions for Dr. Benifield? Any questions at all?
I just want to thank you very much for doing this presentation.
You got another slide?
What is that? Oh, I wanted, choose the voting initiative, go on, like us, share us, click us, bait us, whatever, follow us on social media. Apparently all these things are important. I passed some sources, countdown to the November 4th election. We're already in the midst of early voting. We're at day 4 of early voting.
Yep.
Looking at the data, we haven't been doing so well in the Harris County, so let's get going. We got 12 days until election day from today. These are the dates, and if you need to vote by mail, tell your friends. October 24th is the last day they can vote. They can request a mail ballot vote in the election. And in order to grow the circle, we need you to scan the QR code, put in your information so we can reach out to you to make sure, and that you reach out to your friends. You can share the grow the circle code. You can share it with other people and have them to fill it out as well, so we can engage everybody. We can ill afford for people to sit on the sideline. Everybody has to be in their arena.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Miss Partner wanted to comment to you. Go ahead, Miss Partner, what you were saying?
Thank you very much for coming with this presentation to us. Because this week, I've just been requested to be a precinct judge. I'm going,
Who put my name in that hat?
because I'm very active.
Well, that's why. Somebody knows your activism and they want you to be engaged in the process.
I
Can they call
don't
the
know
difference?
anything, so I'm gonna attend as many trainings as I can.
Well, they have trainings.
Oh, yes, I'm going to one on maybe the 23rd, not 23rd.
So you can do the
Next
election.
Sunday.
So you
Yes.
can do the election day, you're gonna be a judge.
Yes, yes.
Well, I'm signing up to be an election monitor on that day. So to go and be at the polling location for few hours to monitor what's going on, to report if anything is happening, that kind of thing.
But I made the statement, and maybe I shouldn't have, but why did you wait so late to ask me to be a precinct judge?
Hmm.
Well, not fair to me, because I have to get up to 8 people, of which I've already gotten 6.
Okay, see, she already on top of it. She was just waiting for someone to ask you. You were just waiting.
I-
So we all have to do our part.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
and I'm a true believer in
Okay.
that. I've been active in my community.
And like you said, it's probably why you were
That's
asked,
why-
because you are active. I mean, people don't ask inactive people because they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So it's
Always ask busy people to do this stuff.
right, and that's how they get this.
Yeah, and they keep being busy and they pile so much in their schedule.
It just threw me in there.
Yeah.
But on election day, they have over 700 polling locations in Harris County. And so they need more election judges to actually be at these sites. So
At
that's,
first, they wanted me to be at the Kelso Elementary, which is within walking distance from my home, and they changed it to the one on Cambridge, which is about maybe 5 miles from my house. And I'm going, well, how am I gonna get the people that's gonna help me at the homes? Are you gonna provide lifts? Oh,
Well, I'm sure somebody will step
it's
into
an
the,
apartment complex.
some people will step into the gap. Oh, because it's gonna be a high volume area, so that's a good thing. Good,
All right.
you got it, you got
That's
it.
my story for today.
You got it, you got it.
Anybody got any questions for Dr.
Anybody
Ann?
else, any more questions?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity. We've been talking about, one of the co-founders of Houston Voting Initiative. We've been talking about these amendments because we feel like people need to be educated about what's happening.
Yeah, that is my one question. Given what Sister Kim was saying, how can we, and what Ms. Fondo's concerns, this is a lot for people to take in, especially at this late date when we're so close to November 4th. How can concerned, organized, plugged in community leaders, supporters, activists, or whomever, how can we stay on top of this stuff from the earliest of stages, like from the very beginning, when this stuff starts to be a conversation? How can we stay on top of it so when once it gets to this point, the community already knows, is already aware, and we know how we need to vote because we've been paying attention, we've been watching. How do you propose we do that?
As I said, you could track the legislation by going to the website and tracking things that are happening in the legislative session. Get connected to other groups that are having conversations and talking about. One of the things that the Houston Voting Initiative, after every legislative session, we try to do a legislative impact webinar where we get people on to talk about what happened during that session,
Okay,
what were the outcomes,
okay.
and what took place.
Yeah.
For the constitutional amendments, I have some copies of the voter's guide. You can go online and they'll do a very good job. The League of Women Voters Texas does an excellent job. They have the audio version. So you can listen to the pros and cons online.
I'm great.
Yeah,
My senior citizens, those are the ones that
Yes,
I work
they
with.
have them
Yeah.
to listen to it.
Yeah.
Go to LWV Texas and they have the constitutional amendment. They explain it to you in commonplace words, and then they tell you the pros and the cons, so you can make an informed decision. And then they have the voter's guide where you can click on it and pull it up. There's a PDF file that you can pick it up. Here in the Harris County area, the league also has the voter guide in print form, but also online and through library and the Libby system. And they have it in multiple languages. So they have it in multiple languages. So access for your senior citizens, listening to it might be the background than trying to read it.
And some of their kids, they just don't care.
And when you can have a session with them and say, okay, this is what it is, this is what I know about these amendments. You can take the voter's guide in with you.
Yes.
You can go to harrisvote.com, look at your ballot, select the things you're gonna vote for, and you can take it into the ballot with you.
Right.
And if they're disabled, you know, they have curbside service
Yes.
that access in terms of increasing access. And if they need help with the ballot, they can also access and request.
Yes.
So all of those things are part of it. Each of us have a responsibility in our respective communities to make sure that other people are informed. And so as my call to action, and one of my friends said, you need to go to the polls, but you need to take 5 people
Yep.
with you.
Yep.
So they can vote. Because the numbers, as I said, the numbers for the last 3 days in Harris County, particularly in areas of color, have been dismal.
Yes. Nobody's listening.
And that's-
They just feel that they're voting.
Well, let's try harder.
Yes.
Let's try harder.
And
This is where you like to have a choice. In my opinion, I think that we say vote for me versus giving them true information.
Yep.
For instance, when I do my campaign kickbacks.
Yeah.
And the candidates are there, it's a conversation of, stop saying we beating Trump, or we beating Abbott.
Mhm.
Because you're inciting, to me, riotous thought process. You gotta work across the board.
Right.
To me, that notifies people raising up saying, well, these Democrats, my money from these Republican-led organizations, that's been going on forever and a day.
Right.
Right? Marketing, but get the truth of what you stand for.
Yeah.
The versus
Yeah.
personalities
Yeah.
and stirring up the anger.
Yeah, and see that's why we do what we do here, because we got to get the information out, and we want to not only give people the information, but we want to give them the resources to go do the research themselves as much as possible, with enough time, because this is a lot to understand what's what and to vote on it. So as always, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it, and we'll see you guys online next Thursday. Y'all take care. God bless.